Ladies and gentlemen, today is Tuesday, February the 22nd, 2022. I hereby call the Civil Justice Subcommittee to order. Ms. T.J., take the roll.
Representatives Clemens, Curcio, Farmer, Garrett, Griffey, Ogles, Parkinson, Ramsey, Chairman Russell.
Here.
Chairman, you have a quorum.
Thank you, members. We have any personal orders or announcements before we begin? All right, seeing none. First bill is House Bill 2663 by Speaker Sexton and Chairman Farmer. You're recognized.
Yeah.
We got a motion. And a second.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members. Yeah, and I'm carrying this for our Speaker Sexton, and happy to do it because this has been a conversation we've had now for years, almost the entire time I've been up here. We're going to create a mental health treatment court for folks with severe mental illnesses here.
And Chairman, do you have an amendment on that?
I do not. I do. Excuse me.
We got a motion.
Yes, sir.
A second, and let's see what that amendment code you have.
I have 013685.
Okay, that's what I got. And does it make the bill?
It does.
Okay, all those in favor to add an amendment 13685 to House Bill 2663 signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Amendment is added. Chairman Farmer, you're recognized.
And I appreciate the committee for giving me yes or no questions there. So 50-50. But we're on the bill as amended, Mr. Chair.
Yes, Chairman.
Okay, thanks so much. All right, members. As I said, I'm here today to present the House Bill 2663 on behalf of Speaker Sexton. This legislation, known as the Mental Health Treatment Act of 2022, has been introduced to create a new mental health court treatment program. Just want to go through a couple things here. The purpose of this act is to create a new and continue existing mental health court treatment programs statewide. These programs will be administered by the Department of Mental Health and Substance Abuse Services to reduce the use of correctional services by offenders with mental health disorders by diverting them into effective treatment and support for mental illness, while also promoting public safety by reducing the incidence of crimes committed as a result of mental health disorders. And I think the policy behind this is we don't want to be locking up and throwing away the key folks with severe mental illnesses. Now the worst, this doesn't apply to violent offenders or sexual offenders. Let's go ahead and just get that out in front. But folks who are ready to accept the challenge to get help and want to have help with their mental disorders, and it's for a severe and persistent mental illness. That means a diagnosis of one or more qualifying mental illnesses or disorders determined by the Department of Mental Health and Substance Abuse Services. So I think this would be a real good thing to try to help, a real good piece of legislation and policy to try to help those who want help and has been trying to get help, and society's kind of left behind or they've fallen between the cracks on certain crimes. So I think, we always have this saying, rehabilitation over incarceration. I mean, I think it's going to save taxpayer dollars because this is a program that's be grant funded by grants, so courts can go out and ask for grant funding, so it won't be on the backs of taxpayers. So I just ask for passage.
Thank you, Chairman, for that description. And we do have a couple people with questions. Representative Parkinson, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and Chairman Farmer, thank you for bringing this bill. And Speaker, I know you're probably watching. Thank you for bringing the bill. This is a good bill. It's needed. Mental health challenges are extremely prevalent in a lot of our communities in the state of Tennessee, and I'm glad to see this happening. I remember a few years ago, we met with, he wasn't the commissioner of Department of Corrections at the time. He was a warden at one of the prisons, and I remember him telling me that 72% of the inmates that were incarcerated were on mental health medication. And so this is a good bill and a needed bill, and I hope that we can start creating some type of resolve for those that are suffering with mental health challenges. I really appreciate it. And actually, I want to sign on to the Speaker's bill if you'll let me.
Thank you.
And next we have Representative Griffey.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to join my colleagues' sentiment on that and thank the Speaker and Chairman Farmer for bringing this bill. I think it's sorely needed, and I think if you'll talk to law enforcement, they'll indicate that there's a desperate need for treatment of those who have mental difficulties, mental health issues. They're in our criminal justice system. And it's my assessment that Tennessee has not done a good enough job in providing the financial resources to help treat and deal with these folks that are in our communities. And left to their own devices, they oftentimes end up violating laws, and they're subject to manipulation by those that prey upon them. And then they end up in a cycle in our criminal justice system. They cannot comply generally with probation conditions and so forth that most folks can, and it's just a vicious cycle. So I hope, along with this, that administration and all of us will take a serious look at adequately funding mental health services for these folks that are coming through our criminal justice system. So thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Speaker, for bringing this bill.
Thank you, Representative. And Chairman Farmer, you got anything on that?
No response. And I just appreciate those comments, as you practice, as do I, and we're in the courtroom. A lot of time we'll have clients that they have real issues, and there's a couple of courts in my jurisdiction that have programs set up to help folks, and some don't. So hopefully we have the consistency and the continuity to help folks that really need the help and want the help. So thank you for that.
Thank you. And Representative Ogles, you're recognized.
Thank you, Chairman, and Chairman Farmer. Thank you for bringing this bill for the Speaker. I think it's greatly needed. I do have a question about the fact that we don't have a unified court system and we're creating another court. Is this going to be another hurdle for communicating between our different jurisdictions, or do you foresee any other problems created there? And if so, how may we remedy that in the future?
Chairman Farmer.
And that's a great question, because I had missed something I wanted to mention earlier in my presentation. The grant funds here are only to be used for costs directly related to program operations. This does not include paying for an additional judge or courtroom for the program. So essentially what we're going to do, we're going to take our existing judges, we're going to give them the new tools, a whole new toolbox with a bunch of tools in there to use for folks that have these issues and that qualify for these programs. I don't think it's going to cause any sort of consistency or continuity issues within our court systems. I think it's just going to allow them to really provide the help for folks in which they really wanted to help probably this entire time, just hadn't been able to and didn't have the mechanism to do so. So I don't think it's going to cause any sort of distraction or interruptions within our court systems, to answer your question.
Representative Ogles.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, sponsor.
And Chairman Curcio, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And before I ask my question, I just want to apologize for being late. Not complaining, but there were some potholes on 40 that I'm going to use as a tornado shelter later in the spring. So just kind of slowed me down coming in. But so anyway, I apologize for being tardy. But my question, I'd just like to hear from Chairman Farmer, if I could. I knew last year I carried, and we all supported and passed, the governor's alternatives to incarceration bill. As I read through this, I think what this does is why I supported the legislation is, while we created those, we encouraged, judges and law enforcement seeking those alternatives. This seems to me to just create more venue for that. Is that correct? So it's just expanding the treatment options, the mental health options?
Chairman Farmer.
As I said many times before, I couldn't have said it better myself. Yes, that's my understanding.
Okay, great. Well, thank you for the bill. I appreciate your work.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. And Representative Garrett, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I don't really have any particular things to add that my colleagues have said, except that I support the legislation. But I know Judge Eisenstein and Judge Blackburn are here, who are very instrumental in the Davidson County courts for the mental health court here. I don't know, Mr. Chairman, if they've asked to speak on this legislation, what they've been faced. I know I'm maybe kind of putting you all on the spot, and I apologize for that, but I'm really not, because I want to recognize your work and what you've done in this arena. I really appreciate that. I believe Judge Eisenstein is retiring and is in charge, so to speak, of the mental health court here in Davidson County, and Judge Blackburn's taken over. I hope I'm not wrong about that, but I don't know. Maybe you can clarify my remarks, or I'm somewhat wrong or right. But I didn't know if we could hear from them, because they deal with this. I don't know if on a daily basis, but quite often more than we might, to get sort of their opinion of what this legislation might do.
Absolutely. And if they would like to come up and identify themselves, and we'll go out of session.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
And if you'll press the red button, and you'll have 3 minutes.
I'm Judge Melissa Blackburn. I'm the current judge of the Davidson County Mental Health and Veterans Courts. I've been on the bench almost 8 years, and this would be the first time the mental health court in the state of Tennessee would ever be funded. It's currently not funded anywhere in the state of Tennessee. We are required to go to our local county and beg for money every year to fund these courts. So this would finally provide funding for those courts. In year 2019, I can't tell you in 2020 what we did, but in year 2019, the Mental Health and Veterans Court in Tennessee saved the state of Tennessee over $10 million in incarceration costs because those individuals were not sitting in the Davidson County Jail. They were out of jail. They were in a halfway house. They were living with their family. They were in other situations other than sitting in jail. So it saves the state of Tennessee, mental health and veterans courts do, jail nights. In Davidson County, to incarcerate someone, it's $250 with a mental health illness. That's what a jail night costs. So think about that when you're talking about across the entire state, what a savings mental health court is. It also enables people to go back with their families and become a family unit again. It puts mothers and children back together. It totally changes the trajectory of a family. So these courts make an enormous difference in the lives of Tennesseans. So this funding will make a huge difference across the state of Tennessee.
Thank you, Judge. And we have, would you identify yourself, please?
Yeah, if I can, is my microphone on?
Yes.
I'm Dan Eisenstein. I am a retired judge. Thank you. I served, was elected, ran in 2003 and early 4. Took over the mental health court. Mark Fishburne actually got a grant from the federal government, and I took it over when he was appointed to a criminal court. So I ran the court for 10 years before I retired from 2004 through 2014. I reiterate what Judge Blackburn said. At the time, I was the only mental health court in the state of Tennessee, and Davidson County was one of 5 in the country back in the early 2000s. Before I took the bench, after I won a primary election, it became incumbent upon me to go to the council to seek funding because the grant was running out. There was a grant for 3 years, and after it was the second year when I was when I was elected, so I had to go to council, and it wasn't a lot of fun, as you can imagine, but I was able to secure some funding to maintain the court. When I was on the bench, when I would go to conferences, a number of counties all over the state were interested in mental health court, and I was asked to speak at a number of the conferences for judges. But the problem was funding, because they would have to, counties would have to go to their county commissions to get funding to start, and it was very difficult. So there just were a handful by the time I left the bench. But they are extremely, extremely effective in keeping people out of jail who have mental health issues. I mean, you wouldn't believe it. The recidivism rate for those that complete the program is very low, and it's not brain surgery. If you run a court like Judge Blackburn runs a court, and she does a great job, you see these people on a regular basis. You are able to stay on top of a problem. You're able to reward them for proper behavior. You're able to get them housing, use resources in the community to get them services. And believe it or not, a lot of these people, this is the first time that they've had, quote, a friend, and that's in a judge. And that's enormously successful just for that fact, because Judge Blackburn's a friend of theirs, as well as a judge, because she supports them. Now, some people don't do so well, frankly. There are a few, and that happens, but the majority do. And you save both the counties and the state of Tennessee a tremendous amount of money in incarceration expenses. So it's the right thing to do morally and ethically, and it's the right thing to do fiscally. So I encourage this bill, and frankly, I came up here 20 years ago, almost 20 years ago, with the same plea, but I was it. Senator Henry helped me, but I wasn't able to make any progress. So I'm just delighted that this bill was produced, and thank you all for your support that you said you gave today, because I think it's very important, and I think you'll see the results. Thank you so much.
I want to thank both of y'all for your testimony. Members, do we have any questions for Representative Clemens?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Judge Blackburn, Judge Eisenstein, for being here with us today. And I don't want to let this affect anybody's decision about this piece of legislation. After all, it is the Speaker's bill, so be careful. But Judge Blackburn's husband, Gary Blackburn, and his law partner, Malcolm McCune, were my two legal mentors when I first started practicing law. So I have been privileged to know Judge Blackburn for a long time and watch her and take the work that Judge Eisenstein did with the Mental Health Court in Davidson County and grow it and do the best that she possibly can in a very efficient and effective manner with the funds that she was allocated to make a real difference in people's lives. And it has been tremendous to witness and learn about over the almost 8 years now, and she has done a magnificent job. And one of the things that excites me the most about this bill is, you know, we all up here represent our own districts or a portion of a county or several counties even, but we all have a duty to all 6.9 million Tennesseans. And one of the things that excites me about this piece of legislation is it opens up the availability of rehabilitation and these opportunities to all 95 counties, not just a select few that, you know, Davidson County has been fortunate to have the revenues and generate the revenues and be able to appropriate funds for this, and a couple other counties have as well. But this state funding will not only assist those counties, but it will provide the opportunity to many others. And, you know, you shouldn't, your future shouldn't be determined just because you do something wrong in one county versus another. This levels the playing field and provides opportunity for rehabilitation and growth and a brighter future for a lot of people in all 95 counties. So, judges, thank you for the work that you've done. It's been tireless and it's been effective, and we appreciate it. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I appreciate the time and thank you. And I'd love to see bipartisan support for something so important. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Clemens and Representative Griffey.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Judge Blackburn and Judge Eisenstein, I both want to thank you for coming here and testifying from the committee about this. My only comment, and I don't know if either one of you might want to comment, that this approach may also be a way that we can address the homeless situation, because I think so many of our homeless have mental health issues, and having a point person, non-biased, educated, that has the ability to reach out and get resources and report back to the legislature what's going on down on the ground, I think is invaluable, and I hope we'll take a look at that as we go into the future. But thank you both very much again.
Thank you. And would y'all like to respond to either one of the representatives?
I'm happy to. There are a number of homeless individuals that have come through both my mental health and veterans courts, and one out of each of the courts in particular told me when they were graduating that but for the court, they would have been dead because of the drugs they were using, because of the living on the streets, etc. And both graduated from the mental health and veterans courts with jobs, with housing, and clean. So it's amazing what these restorative courts do.
I just want to reiterate what Judge Blackburn says. When I was on the bench, the majority were homeless. And the first thing that we did, obviously, because most people were coming out of jail was find a place to live, which today and back then wasn't easy, but we were able to do it. And that's the number one thing, that you've got to have a person in a spot, not on the street. So it is all tied together 100%. So I really do appreciate that. And I would encourage any of you that have the time, I know you don't have much, Judge Blackburn has a graduation on a regular basis, and I did too. And it's really heartwarming to go to those. Representative Clemens probably has been to one, because you can then see actually what you've done if you with a mental health court and a veterans court, which are tied together. So thank you for bringing that up, Representative. That you're absolutely right. It's all together. Thank you.
And I'm happy to send you all an invitation to the next graduation. They're usually on Tuesday afternoons for mental health court and Monday afternoons for veterans court.
That would be great. And I'd like to thank both of y'all for being here. We don't have anybody else listed for any questions, and we appreciate the insight that you give us on the mental health issues here in Tennessee. So thank you all. Members, we're back in session. Chairman Farmer, you're recognized.
Thank you, Chairman, members, and I appreciate our guests who came and speak to us, and I agree with everything they've said, and I had some great questions here today, and I hope I've answered those as best I can. I just renew my motion, move for passage.
Question on the bill.
All right, we got a question on the bill. We're voting on House Bill 2663 as amended. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Bill passes and goes to civil full. Next up is item number 2, House Bill 2330 by Representative Bricken. We got a motion. Do we have a second? We got a second, and Representative Bricken, you're recognized on House Bill 2330. And I do have an amendment if you'd like to read me that amendment number.
Thank you, Chairman and committee members. The amendment's 13794.
That's what I got. We got a motion and a second. All those, does it make the bill?
The amendment makes the bill.
Okay, the amendment makes the bill. Do we have we got a motion and a second. All those in favor of adding Amendment 13794 to House Bill 2330 signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, no. The ayes have it. It is amended. And Representative Bricken, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I came here last week and explained this bill a little bit. This is a bill for Tennessee citizens that have taken the extra effort to get the enhanced handgun permit, and for citizens to be encouraged to get the enhanced handheld permit. It basically does away with the 8-year term and makes it a lifetime permit. It's a $100 fee, so it reduces the cost from the $300 lifetime to $100. If you're a veteran, it's $65. If you currently have an enhanced handheld gun permit for $50, you can apply and that permit will become a lifetime permit. That's what the bill does. I'd be glad to answer any question.
Thank you, Representative Bricken. And Representative Clemens, safety's here. Do you want to ask the sponsor a question, or would you like to have? Okay, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I can ask this question before or after safety, whatever you prefer. Two questions. So there is legislation pending before this committee that would change the language of this law to not just a handgun carry permit, but a firearm carry permit. If that bill were to pass, would that affect your support for your own legislation in any way?
Representative Bricken.
I really can't answer that. I haven't looked at that legislation. I'm going to just let this one stand on its own and see where it goes.
Representative Clemens.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. There's a provision in Section 2 in 1 of your legislation that requires the permit holder to have the permit in the holder's immediate possession at all times when carrying a handgun. And they shall display the permit on demand of a law enforcement officer under certain circumstances. What happens if they do not have the permit on their possession when a law enforcement officer requires it to be displayed?
Representative Bricken.
Thank you. I can answer that. If an anybody from legal or law enforcement's here, I'll be glad to ask them, but I can't answer that.
And we'll go out of session and hear from legal. Out of session. And legal, you're recognized.
Is that legal? That isn't legal. It's not legal.
So under current law, what happens if the individual does not have the permit? Are they dispossessed of the firearm or a handgun at that time, or fined on the spot, or what's that process?
It looks like the permit could be suspended or revoked if they don't comply with that particular provision. But I will look at it. I'm going to keep looking while we talk.
You go back in session.
Okay, we'll go back in session. And Representative Clemens.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And that's a question of mine, because the language here expressly requires that permit to be on the person at all times, and I'm a little unclear as to whether or not this is going to allow a lawful handgun permit holder to be dispossessed of their firearm. And I also have a question as to whether or not what the grounds are for a law enforcement officer to be able to request that permit. What would give them cause to do that? Do you have any opinion on that?
No, but again, Tennessee has, thank you, Mr. Chairman, Tennessee has a permitless carry for firearms right now. So the enhanced permit certainly is primarily for Tennessee citizens that want to feel comfortable taking their firearms out of state to states that has reciprocity. So that's, and they certainly want the enhanced training that is required of the handheld enhanced permit. So, you know, I don't think law enforcement's going to be taking away guns if you don't have your permit, because you can carry it anyway in Tennessee.
Representative Clemens.
Thank you. Well, that's a serious concern of mine, and that was a serious concern that many of us raised when the law was passed and amended in recent years, was, you know, if you have just people walking around with handguns on their person, how do the law enforcement officials know which ones are a threat to public safety, which ones aren't, and under what grounds would they be able to ask for that permit? And your statute or your legislation here, and I understand, you know, that some of it's existing law, and that's my question is, okay, so what grounds will a law enforcement officer have to request that permit? And then if they don't have the permit, whether they have one or they just left it at home or left their wallet, you know, in their car or something like that, can that law enforcement official just dispossess them of that firearm on the spot? How long can they hold it? What's that process? Is there a penalty? It sounds to me like the initial response from legal is that there might be a process, and that would require the lawful firearm carrier to, you know, expend a lot of money to go through the court process to get that firearm back or to defend themselves against a citation of some sort. So that's my concern. Thank you for your effort to answer those questions, and if legal wants to chime back in at some point, then I'd welcome that. Thank you, Mr. Sponsor.
You're welcome.
Representative Brigham.
No more comments.
All right, Representative Parkinson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, sponsor. So just a couple of questions. As amended, will there still be the ability to get the regular permit at the cost that it is now also as an option, or is this the only option in regards to permitting?
No, the permitless or the online permit is still available. Okay. So this is just for the enhanced handgun permit.
Okay. And in regards to, I know that in getting the enhanced permit, there's background check. Am I correct?
Correct.
Okay. And so would it be in a lifetime permit? Will there be continued background checks, and how often?
Every 4 years.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
And just to clarify, this just extends the current handgun permit?
Yes, it becomes a lifetime permit.
Okay, thank you. And we'll go out of session and hear from safety. Out of session. And safety, you're recognized if you'll just identify yourself.
Elizabeth Stroker, Legislative Director for the Department of Safety, and we just have one minor thing. I know that since it's been a short week, we were just able to get with Representative Bricken, I think yesterday afternoon, and whenever I emailed you, but there's one odd little situation in the bill that I think could be fixed fairly easily. That it's a very complicated piece of code, so if you're not in it all the time like I am, you may not know, but whenever it makes the upgrade from the current, let's say you have now an 8-year permit, I have an 8-year permit right now. If I did not want to upgrade to the lifetime, if this were to change, because it is not mandatory in the bill, it removes the entire section on how you would renew the 8-year permit. So then there's no way to actually renew it if that person does not want to upgrade. So it's a weird situation where it either needs to be mandatory that everyone would have to get it, or you're going to have to keep the mechanism in there for those that already have it that want to keep the 8-year. That may not make sense, but it's a weird little situation that was created.
Thank you for that. And Representative Parkinson, you're recognized.
And thank you, Mr. Chair. And I think that's the question, and that's the question that I was asking: is that option still available? And so if this bill passes, that option for, because I got a regular handgun permit, and on that line, can you tell me the difference between my handgun permit and an enhanced?
Ms. Stroker?
Yeah, so to your first question, yes, the bill would eliminate the 8-year permit, which is fine. The lifetime and the 8-year are the exact same thing. It's just a matter of if you want to renew it every 8 years or not. They're the exact same thing, same requirements, same background, same training, same everything. Now your second question, are you talking about the concealed or the enhanced that you have?
I was asking, I don't think I have enhanced. I think I got regular concealed.
And I'm guessing you got it within the past 2 years then? And did an online course, or did you get it more than 2 years ago?
No, more than 2 years ago.
Then you have the enhanced, yes. It's like the old, whenever concealed carry passed, they renamed the regular permit the enhanced permit, so to have a difference in names. So you have the enhanced, and if it's an 8-year, that's where we need to fix the situation of if you didn't want to get the lifetime because it's discretionary in the bill, we would need a mechanism to renew that 8-year or make it mandatory, one of those two things.
Representative Parkinson?
Thank you. And from the department's standpoint, would it, if we just amended the bill to allow for the option, would the department incur any other costs on it?
What do you mean? Like an option for them to keep the 8-year?
For us to keep the 8-year, and for those that have the enhanced to go to the lifetime, if we had both options.
Well, you can do that now.
Okay.
So we're okay with the intent of what the sponsor's trying to do here. We just need some cleanup on what we do with the people who would no longer be able to renew the 8-year,
Gotcha.
or allow them to renew it and just grandfather them in until it cycles through, or something along those lines.
Understood. Thank you, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Elizabeth.
Thank you. And Representative Griff, you got a question for safety?
Thank you, yes. For clarification, it's the way the language is in this bill, it eliminates the renewal for the 8-year permit. Am I correct in understanding?
Ms. Stroker?
Yeah, and I think it just inadvertently, because I get you want to delete the whole 8-year section because it's no longer needed because you're only going to have the lifetime, but in doing that, it also deleted the renewal mechanism for those who didn't upgrade.
Representative Griffin?
So if we eliminate the renewal provision, if you're reading it, wouldn't it pretty much just automatically convert all those permits to lifetime permits? Do we really need to tweak it or not, is what I'm kind of wondering. And maybe that's a question for legal here.
And I think yes, in theory, but as the code is drafted and how the bill is written, it really would not make sense, like legally and from a procedural standpoint. I think you could definitely imply that, but as an attorney, I really like things super clear because, that just makes things better. But
Representative Griffey?
Mr. Chairman, could we ask that same question to legal?
We
please?
can. We'll go out of, we're already out of session. Legal, you're recognized.
Michelle Fogarty, Legal Services. The bill rewrites 3917-1351N1, which currently says that a permit issued pursuant to this section shall be good for 8 years and shall entitle the permit holder to carry a handgun. It rewrites that to say a permit issued pursuant to this section shall entitle the permit holder to carry any handgun or handguns that the permit holder legally owns or possesses. An enhanced handgun carry permit shall not expire and shall continue to be valid for the life of the permit holder, unless the permit holder no longer meets the requirements of this section.
Representative Griffey.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I'll say when we go back into session, it just appears to me that as written, we don't really need to do anything, but if the committee is more comfortable, I would propose we go ahead and pursue it, pass this out of sub, and we tweak it between sub and full. So that'd be my thoughts on that. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, and Representative Parkinson. We're out of session for safety, yes. Either one, safety or legal, it's up to you.
Thank you for that. And so, and just so I'm clear, it sounded like what I heard in that language, that my permit would automatically become a lifetime permit. Am I incorrect in that?
$50.
Ms. Stroker.
Okay. Out of order. No, I'm just kidding.
Yes, yes, sorry. But the issue is the face of the permit itself is going to have an expiration date on it. And we found that to be very problematic. We have certain permits now that don't have expiration dates. We've had to add language to it, like military, active military don't. And so that's kind of my issue is, yes, it is automatic. You could assume that or imply that, but the permit itself is not going to be valid because it is going to expire if they do not choose to come in. And that's kind of my issue, is there's no mechanism for, we would just like to know how we need to handle that. We just need to send everyone a new one that doesn't have an expiration date, or do we require that they send theirs in and send us a different one? That's the issue, is that it's not going to be compliant with the law because it will have an expiration date.
Representative Parkinson, got a follow-up?
No, thank you. Thank you for that.
Okay, we don't have anybody else on the list for safety, so we'll go back in session. And Chairman Curcio, you're first on the list.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I guess I just want to hear from the sponsor what your legislative intent. Do you just intend for there not to be an option to renew it every 8 years? You just want this to be automatic. Is that right? That the posture we're trying to get into?
Representative Bricken.
Yes, I will say generally yes. I just wanted anybody that had the enhanced permit to know that that can become a lifetime permit. All they have to do is file for when it expires or comes up, whatever the deadline is, they'll submit an application for reissuance. That application of reissuance costs $50 and they'll get a lifetime permit issued to them.
Okay. All right.
Chairman Curcio.
Well, thank you for that clarification. I mean, it sounds like that's what you've accomplished, but we just may need some administrative tweaks or technical tweaks to make sure that they can change the date on my license.
Representative Bricken.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have no trouble. I'll certainly get with safety. I certainly would like this committee to pass it out, and if it goes to full, you know, safety will be on board, and I'll be on board with safety. I don't have any issues. What I heard from them on clarifying that language. So, for you know, somebody that has an 8-year permit, there's a good chance they're going to let it lapse for whatever reasons, and then it needs to be clarified what that happens to that 8-year permit if it does lapse, and I think that's part of the clarification.
Chairman Curcio, got any more?
No, sir. Thank you.
Representative Griffey, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would suggest maybe we pass it here, and when we get in full committee, we just add a provision that says, as any 8-year permit expires, the Department of Safety will reissue showing lifetime renewal to the permit holder unless they become disqualified for some other reason or something like that. So that'd be my thoughts on it. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Representative Bricken. You got anything?
No.
Representative Parkinson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And to my colleague, you know, I think that before we use that language that you use, we may want to get with the sponsor, because your language may add a fiscal note to it. If we just tell safety to just send everybody new cards. And but I understand your intent, and I understand the sponsor's intent. And so I'm okay with, passing it out and just getting with, you and safety pull together and, work out the little administrative stuff. Because I don't see any of the language or any of the things that safety and Attorney Stroker was saying that is substantial, a substantial change to what your intent is. So I'd be okay with that.
Representative Bricken.
But we don't want to add a fiscal note to your bill, or any more of a fiscal note to your bill. So.
Thank you.
Right. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. And Representative Ogles, you're recognized.
Thank you, Chairman. How many permits are we talking about?
There are 790,000 eight-year permits currently in the state of Tennessee.
Representative Ogles.
Is that about right?
Thank you, Chairman. So this is not a small number. So this could have vast, financial application if we don't get this right. Is my only concern. So I do think we need some clarification on if we're sending out new permits and the cost incurred to the state. And I understand, we need to get this right and before we process it. And just for clarification for the record, we're talking about renewal. There's semi-auto renewal, auto renewal. There's no such thing as full auto. Just a little for the record. I hear that said all the time. Thank you, Chairman.
Appreciate that.
Thank you. And Representative Bricken, you got anything to follow up with that?
No.
Okay, with nobody else on the list, we're going to be voting on House Bill. I'm sorry, we got one more. Representative Clemens, you're
I
recognized.
apologize, Mr. Chairman. The question had been raised, and I hate bringing up fiscal notes in the committees outside of finance, but did safety talk about, and somebody can answer this if I just missed it, where those monies goes? Because this talk about decreasing state revenue for over $3.2 million, and I don't know where those funds currently go and what, if the general fund's losing them, or if there's some specific account that's losing them that does something great for Tennesseans. That's my question.
Representative Bricken, do you know that, or would you like to go out of session?
I don't know the answer to that, so somebody else smarter than I can, maybe.
Okay, we'll go out of session and hear from safety. Out of session. And safety, you're recognized if you'll just identify yourself again for the record.
Elizabeth Stroker, Legislative Director for Department of Safety. Representative Clemens, that money actually goes into a designated fund to run. It does not go to the general fund. It goes to a designated fund within the department for the operations of that division.
Thank you. And Representative Clemens, you're recognized.
Thank you. What all does that division do?
That division is solely responsible for issuing and renewing handgun permits within the Highway Patrol.
Representative Clemens.
And if those funds are lost for that division, how is it going to be funded?
Ms. Stroker.
I would assume, just like any other bill, the fiscal note would just have to be funded through the General Appropriations Act.
Representative Clemens.
On a recurring basis?
Ms. Stroker.
Yes.
Representative Clemens.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else for safety? Seeing none, we'll go back in session. Okay, we don't have anybody on the list. We're now voting on House Bill 2330 as amended. All those in favor to send to civil justice full signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, no. The ayes have it. Civil justice full.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, committee.
Thank you. Okay, that brings us to item number 3, and by the request of the sponsor, this bill has been rolled to the final calendar. Okay, item number 4, House Bill 477. Chairman White. Chairman White, you're recognized. We do have a motion and a second, and I do show an amendment. Do you have an amendment you'd like to add?
I do, and I would like to explain it, and then I may request a roll if it be the will of the committee. I've got a couple.
Okay, we do have a motion. Do we have a second? And we have a second. You're recognized on, and
The amendment was 13103.
yes, sir, 13103. You're recognized.
Okay, members, we put this amendment on, but this particular bill we actually passed in the House 2 years ago, And then the pandemic hit and the Senate closed down, so it never went through in the Senate side. So I brought it back last year and brought it back this year. To me, it seems to be a pretty simple bill, but it does, like most things, it has a couple of kinks that we're trying to work out that were brought to me. In state law, state statute, Code 39, 17, 1959, and 1350, the code says that a law enforcement officer may carry their firearm at all times. That is their job and their duty. Now, we are a permit and a permitless carry state, and so we do give the option to private businesses to post a sign that says firearms are not allowed in the business. Well, by doing that, it has caused confusion for law enforcement officers when they would go into such an establishment. They say, no, you can't carry a gun. Well, state statute says they may. So there's been confusion. So what we're trying to do is just change the signage going forward. Says all law enforcement officers are exempt. No issue there, but it does create some issues with some of your big entertainment complexes like Bridgestone or the Titans or even some of your higher education institutions, because they have a process in place so that if you are a law enforcement officer, you've got to check in this, that, and other. So I'm trying to get that worked out with them. Basically a simple law, but not everything's as simple as it looks. So state code already says a law enforcement can carry a firearm in all establishments. That's their job, 24/7. But we're trying to work it out with these big entertainment complexes that have their own thing. Like I understand, and the amendment that we added, all that change is that it has to be a Tennessee law enforcement. It does not apply to any law enforcement outside the state of Tennessee. So with that explanation, if I may, if I've got that available, may I roll it?
Well, hold on just a second. We can't roll it. You're on your third calendar. We can put it on the special calendar.
Okay, with that be the case, I was getting ready to ask that too. Well, I don't want the bill to die. I either need to do that or unless the committee thinks we can move it to the full and then maybe work that out and see if we got anything worked out for full committee.
Okay, would you like to add this amendment first?
Yes.
Okay, so do you have, okay, so let's, we got a question on the amendment. We're voting on Amendment 13103. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, no. Amendment's added. Chairman, you're recognized.
Okay, I will yield to the Representative Ogles.
Representative Ogles.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you to the sponsor. This is a great piece of legislation. I just hope when you're working out some of the negotiations with your big venues, you're sure that they create a process that's encourages our law enforcement officers to carry their firearm, and that we don't create a lot of red tape to discourage them from doing that in their facilities. This is something that they need to be able to do and not have to go through some tedious special process that requires something that's just overwhelmingly burdensome to them to do that, because we need those officers to be armed at all time. Thank you to the sponsor.
Chairman Watt.
Very much appreciate that, and that's the issue. I think that, like the Bridgestone, they have it worked out where you come in as law enforcement and you check in and they know what seat you're in and all those things. So I think they're okay, a few others. But there was a few questions from the Titans and things, and so always like to get things worked out. So with that in mind, committee, I would like to move this bill forward if it be the will of the committee. Now, if it's not, then we had to put on the special calendar. Unless y'all feel that it would be willing to go to full committee, then I can see if I can't get that worked out between now and then.
Thank you. The next on the list is Chairman Garrett, or Representative Garrett.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Mr. Chairman, thank you for bringing this legislation. I certainly would support it in its current form. I agree with what's already been said as our officers. This applies to officers, and officers on duty, I believe, are not on duty, correct? When they're not on duty.
Right, yeah, 24/7, you're an officer by state statute. It's already in code. It's just created confusion because of the signage that's up, and they walk in and say, no, you can't bring your firearm in. Well, I'm a law enforcement officer. So that's what that amendment did, was change the signage. All law enforcement officers are exempt.
Good deal.
Representative
And
Garrett.
thank you, Mr. Chairman. And so, with the are you hearing this opposition, not opposition, maybe concerns from the large entertainment venues? Is that my understanding? There's not. I mean, we got restaurants, et cetera, that still have the sign that can say whether or not folks can come in with a firearm. Does it apply broadly to any property owner that says, by statute, they do not allow firearms in their particular establishment? They would have to amend that sign. Is that my understanding?
Yeah, that sign, it would say, all law enforcement officers are exempt. Now, we're not going back to the signs already printed because that would create a fiscal note just going forward. It would say that. So, and the issue is, like I have been told, like I worked on this last year and this year, and we finally didn't run it last year because of this very issue. Like, I think the Bridgestone Arena, my Grizzlies down there, they're okay now because of it fits in with what they're doing, the way they got it set up. The Titans, you got 60,000 people coming to the stadium, and I'm getting pushed back there, and I got to find out why. See if they get that. Why wouldn't it work for them if it works for the Grizzlies and works for the Predators and things like that? And then there is one institution of higher education that's come to me also about the way they do things. So just trying to get it worked out with them, and willing to do that. But basically, it's already in code. A law enforcement officer can carry a firearm, but we just got to get it worked out with those institutions.
Representative Garrett.
Thank you very much for that, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, next up is Representative Clemens.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Does this bill in any way expand the rights of law enforcement officers or off-duty law enforcement officers to carry their firearms in any of these venues that we're concerned about?
Chairman Watt.
No, it does not. And as a matter of fact, I think it's code 3917, 1350. There are certain exemptions where they can't, like in a bar where they're drinking or anything like that. They cannot. So it doesn't expand anything. It is in current code.
Representative Clemens.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. What about a Little League ballpark or something like that?
Chairman Watt.
No, I don't have my guest on the 24-hour notice, so I'm not sure about that. I would say it does because this is a public venue, and I would personally like to see law enforcement officer have, on a park. But can you give me a nod?
We can probably go out of session.
Yeah.
Well,
Chairman, we probably can go out of session and ask legal if you need that, Representative Clemens.
One more question.
Yeah.
And then we can if you want to, if you don't mind. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So there is currently legislation pending that would classify anyone with an enhanced handgun carry permit as a member of law enforcement. So if that bill were to pass and you were to put this on signs, are you not worried that this would create some confusion for individuals just because they have a enhanced handgun carry permit? They want to walk into a Predators game and they think because that sign says law enforcement officers and they know we passed a bill saying they're now law enforcement officers, that they can carry the gun in these venues?
Chairman Watt.
I'm not familiar with that particular piece of legislation you're talking about, but that's probably one of the things we're trying to work out right now. Yes or no? We're working on that. Yeah, that's part of the thing we're working out. Like with 60,000 walking into a ball game. Yeah.
Representative Clemens.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, I mean, some legislation we pass up here may make sense on the surface, but when you connect it with another piece of legislation, it creates a real problem, or it's two puzzle pieces fitting together that create a really dangerous situation for a lot of citizens, and that's what we're potentially looking at here. I mean, if you're going to create a situation where an handgun carry permit holder considers themselves and are considered by Tennessee code annotated a law enforcement officer, and everybody thinks they can just carry a firearm anywhere they want just because the sign says that word, it creates a very dangerous situation, a more dangerous situation than we currently have. So I would ask you to consider that. Thank you, Mr.
You
Chairman.
want to go out of session and ask legal that question?
Sure.
Okay, out of session, legal, you're recognized.
Michelle Fogarty, Legal Services. Under 3917-1350, any law enforcement officer may carry firearms at all times and in all places within Tennessee, on duty or off duty, regardless of the officer's regular duty hours or assignments, unless they are consuming beer or an alcoholic beverage, or they are under the influence of alcohol, beer, or a controlled substance or a controlled substance analog, or they are not engaged in the actual discharge of their duties while attending a judicial proceeding, or they are not engaged in the actual discharge of duties and they are on school grounds or inside a school during regular school hours and they have not notified the principal of their presence. And the Attorney General has opined in May of 2018 that a posting prohibiting firearms on the property is not one of those exceptions listed in 3917-1350, and therefore a law enforcement officer may carry firearms onto public or private property in Tennessee, even if there is a posted prohibition.
Representative Clemens.
So does that law provide a venue owner or manager, such as the Predators or the Titans, to revisit someone who has entered their facility, and say the Predators, if they do a check and they know what seat they're in, are the Predators able to go to that individual, in the middle of the second period and see if they have started drinking after they initially checked them?
Legal, you recognized.
I believe the issue with, for instance, the Titans is that the NFL policy is that no weapons are allowed, and it's part of their ticket. And when you purchase a ticket, you agree to those terms, and therefore they can, if you try to enter their premises with a firearm, they can revoke your ticket. So the person would not, the law enforcement officer would not necessarily be violating the criminal statute, but they could be trespassing if they refuse to leave the premises with their firearm. I believe that's the issue there, but I'm not certain.
Representative Clemens.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, legal. I guess what I was asking is if the law expressly provides the opportunity for the venue owner to take further action after allowing the individual into the facility with the firearm and knowing that they're a law enforcement officer, does the statute expressly allow them to then revisit that individual at a later time during that event in that venue to make sure that they are not drinking or acting inappropriately?
Legal, you recognized.
Under under 3917-1350, if a law enforcement officer is consuming beer or an alcoholic beverage, then the authority conferred by that section does not extend to them. So they would be in violation of that section.
Representative Clemens.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, legal.
Okay, we don't have any other questions for legal. We do. Representative Ogles. We don't. We're back in session. Chairman White, you're recognized.
Thank you very much. So as was read by legal, this is already in code. We're trying to make it clear to where our law enforcement officers do not have issues with carrying a firearm on or off duty. Now, I'm at the will of the committee whether, while we get a couple things addressed, such as we just talked about, whether we go on the full committee and or you want it on your special calendar, or which is down the road. And
thank you. We've still got several questions. Representative Ramsey, you recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I was going to ask the indulgence of the committee. I had a request from one of the managers for one of the large venues to make his feelings known, but we've already discussed that, so I'm satisfied. So I'll pass. I will say that I voted initially for both these bills that you're referring to, and they were good bills, and so we'll look forward to hopefully supporting this one.
Thank you, Chairman Ramsey. And Representative Parkins, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to my colleague from Shelby. So do you anticipate that any adjustments that are going to be made will be any substantial changes to your legislation?
Chairman Watt.
I don't see substantial. I think we just need to get it worked out with this entertainment venue. From what I've been told, like a couple down in Shelby County where we live, the FedEx Forum, the Grizzlies, they're okay with it. I've been told that. So I think we just got to get some kinks worked out with maybe a couple of others.
And thank you for that, Mr. Sponsor. If the Grizzlies are okay, no one else really matters. But I'm just kidding, y'all. I'm just joking, y'all. Don't run me off with rakes and pitchforks. I'm just joking. And but Mr. Chair, I would say if I can make a motion, can I?
You can make a motion.
Okay. Well, I would make a motion that we move this bill out, and if there's any substantial changes, that bill then is referred to that other calendar to be heard if there's anything substantial. But if it's non-substantial, I say we move it out to the full committee. That's the motion.
And do we have a second? We've got a second to move House Bill 477 out to Civil full. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, no. Ayes have it. Congratulations, Chairman. Civil full.
Thank you, committee. I very much appreciate it, and I will give my word. I will work with those who have issues.
Representative Ogles, you're recognized.
Thank you, Chairman. To the sponsor, this is a little late, but I hope these organizations heed the laws that are already in place in the state of Tennessee, and I hate to think that we're adjusting legislation for one specific organization, no matter how much we may appreciate their presence in our state. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. And next up is item number 5, House Bill 1735 by we have a motion and a second. And Representative Todd, you recognize on House Bill 1735. I show an amendment. Do you have an amendment?
Yes, sir, I do. Drafting code 013807.
And that's what I got. We got a motion and a second. Does it make the bill? Or?
This does make the bill, sir.
Okay, so we'll go ahead and add that. All those in favor by adding the amendment 13807 to House Bill 1735 signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, no. Amendment's added. Chairman, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and the committee. I appreciate the opportunity to bring this to you today. This is an item that reminds me as I'm walking these halls about our duty and our commitment to uphold the Constitution of the United States. And part of that duty and that commitment is to adhere to the language of the Constitution. As many of you know, in our Second Amendment to the Constitution, it clearly states that the rights of citizens, and I would argue that the adult citizens of legal age, of 18, have the right given by God that's recognized in the Constitution to keep and bear arms, and that right shall not be infringed. And all this does is remove an infringement that we currently have in code of 18 to 20, up to 21-year-olds that are legal adults that have the ability and the right to cast a vote for you and I and many others running for office. They have not only the ability but the duty to sign up for selective service and, if drafted, join the military and be strapped with a lot of responsibilities on foreign soil even. We also, in the Constitution, recognize an 18-year-old as a member of the militia automatically upon becoming the age of majority. So the purpose of this legislation is to bring the legal age to get an enhanced permit or permit to carry, or to fall under our permitless carry provisions in this state that we passed last year, get that legal age to where it should be with the age of a majority, 18 years old. So that's simply what it does, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Chairman Todd. And we've got a couple people that wants to testify. We'll go out of session before we take questions. Let safety testify first. And we're out of session. Safety, if you'll just identify yourself for the record.
Elizabeth Stroker, Legislative Director for the Department of Safety. Hello again. Chairman Todd, thank you. The Department of Safety, our concerns with this bill really comes from, obviously, the safety standpoint, and I'm not going to, delve into the debate of 18-year-olds versus 21-year-olds. I know we've had that many, many times. However, this bill would potentially cost us reciprocity with up to 21 other states if this were to pass. Those are states that either do not allow for people of that age range to carry. I can't, and I know, Chairman Todd, we talked about this on Friday, I can't give a definitive of how many that would be because we do a survey with them once new laws are updated, and they won't give us a, preemptive, we would likely pull your reciprocity until they see that it's already changed, but we could lose reciprocity where our permit would no longer be accepted or valid in up to 21 other states, and that would be detrimental and it wouldn't just apply to people who are 18, it would be anyone that has that permit. They would not accept it at all. So that's really kind of where we're coming from, is that would be a pretty big hit for anyone that wants to travel out of state.
Thank you. And Representative Clemens, you're first on the list.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, so that was going to be my question. In the current statute, there is an exception for 18 to 20-year-olds with an extensive list of military service requirements and honorable discharge and the like, and I was curious as to the intent for that in our original legislation, and I suspect it was because of this reciprocity agreement. Is that correct?
Ms. Stroker.
Yes, that did come up when that bill passed. I think Representative Goins had it 4 years ago, and that was why it was so restricted. And I believe we may have even still lost a state or two with reciprocity. I'd have to go back and dig in the records, but that was why it was so restricted, because of the reciprocity issue.
Representative Clemens.
Thank you. And have any conversations been had with these, 21 other states as to the possibility of amending the reciprocity with those other states, or is that just something that's kind of out of our control?
Ms. Stroker.
We do an annual survey with all of the other states after each legislative session, because we keep a list of reciprocity on our website as laws change. And our handgun director pulled the data from all the other states and pulled the ones that do not allow for that. And so that's our estimate is up to 21, but he said that they won't give us a definitive unless the bill or the law actually changes, and we do our annual survey.
Representative Clemens.
Seems like quite a gamble. Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, Representative Griffey.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So for purposes of clarification, you're indicating that if we change this, it goes to 18, that other states that don't have that will lose the ability for anybody with a permit in Tennessee to go to another state and get recognized with reciprocity to carry a handgun. Is that
Ms. Stroker.
y'all's indication or position?
Potentially, yes. And I can't give a definitive because they won't tell us one way or the other unless it passes. But yes, they would no longer honor our permit because it would not be something they would allow in their states. It could be up to those 21 states. It could be, I can't say how many it would be, but that could be what it is.
Representative Griffey.
Okay, used the word potentially. So potentially, is it possible that those who were 21 and older that have a permit go to another state, those other states will recognize reciprocity? But if you're under 21 and you have a permit from Tennessee and you go to another state, you might get stopped by law enforcement and risk being subjected to unlawful possession of a weapon or a handgun. Is that another potential outcome in your estimation?
Potentially, but generally how reciprocity works is they either accept the permit or they do not. So I can't say. I'd have to do more digging, but I don't know if they would just be like, well, if we can see your age, we may allow it or we may not. It may be that they just don't allow the permit at all, is kind of what we've seen in the past.
Representative Griffey.
And are there any states that currently allow individuals 18 years or older to lawfully possess, either with a permit or without a permit?
Ms. Stroker.
There are, yes.
Representative Griffey.
And how many?
Ms. Stroker.
I'd have to pull my list up. It's between 7 and 9, but some of those it's with the variation of potentially no permit requirement or constitutional carry. And so I'd have to do a little bit more digging. I pulled all this stuff late on Friday, but that's what you're looking at for those.
Representative Griffey.
Okay, and so the person that does this researching and pulling information from the various other jurisdictions, do they know that these 7 or 9 states that have permits for 18 years or older, are they denied reciprocities with these other jurisdictions?
Ms. Stroker.
And I don't know the answer to that. I don't know what all the other states allow for and what states they recognize or don't recognize. And that's where I told Chairman Todd we were trying to get that information, but it may just take some time to figure that out.
Representative Griffey.
Thank you.
Chairman Curcio, you're recognized.
That was my question, so thank you. I pass.
Okay, that's all we have for legal. We do have, Chairman Farmer, you're recognized.
And how many, are you aware of how many states that in total that we have reciprocity with?
Ms. Stroker.
Oh, I should know that. I can do some quick math and pull up on the website how many we have, and I can let y'all know fairly quickly. I just don't know off the top of my head.
Chairman Farmer.
And out of the 21 that we may have issues with, are any of those 21 Are any of the 7 that you spoke of that have the broad language for the 18-year-old, the hand gear, are any of those 7 a part of those 21?
Ms. Stroker.
Kind of, and I say that as kind of, and I may just have to pull it and send y'all the list and break down, but some of those states, we do not have reciprocity with those ones that have that age range being allowed. So that also kind of, there wouldn't be dual reciprocity. So some of those we have reciprocity with, some of them we don't. So, but I can send that list to everyone.
Chairman Farmer.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. That's all.
Thank you. That's all we got for safety, and we've got Miss Kathy Barnett on the list. Miss Barnett, if you'll come up and press the red button, identify yourself, and you'll have 3 minutes. Make sure your red button's on there. You may have to pull that microphone just a little bit closer down. Thank you.
Okay. Can you hear me? Okay.
Perfect.
Good morning. I'm Kathy Barnett, representing Moms Demand Action for Gun Sense in America, Tennessee. I'm also a mother, a grandmother of 11, and a retired teacher. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to you today against House Bill 1735. This bill would lower the age for carrying a handgun from 21 to 18. I agree with the reciprocity issue, but I want to take it from a different angle. Studies show that the human brain is not fully developed until the age of 25. The prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain that controls judgment and decision-making, is the last part of the brain to develop, and it isn't finished until around 25. While in many ways we treat them as adults in our society when they turn 18, voting, marrying without parental permission, joining the military, science shows that most teenagers are not mature enough to make split-second life and death decisions while in possession of a gun. Impulse control and sensation-seeking are both behaviors that teenagers are still learning to navigate, and adding guns to the mix is extremely dangerous. We already know from existing research what happens when you add a firearm to incomplete brain development, namely 18, 19, and 20-year-olds commit gun homicides at a rate that is 3 times higher than adults ages 21 and older. In Tennessee, we are already facing a dramatic increase in gun homicides and suicides. The rate of gun deaths in Tennessee increased 48% between 2011 and 2020. Guns are the leading cause of death among children and teens in America, or in Tennessee, sorry. This is not the time to invite more gun death and injury by lowering the permitting age to include teenagers whose brain development is incomplete. While we do include adults ages 18 and up in our military, they are provided with extensive firearms training. Young soldiers are taught to follow orders from their officers, not the opposite. They don't get to decide when to shoot. Their superiors do that. Even given all their training, Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Mark Milley, stated, "I don't think soldiers should have concealed weapons on base." That's quote, unquote. Another major concern is the rise of anxiety and depression in our society. The ADAA, Anxiety and Depression Association of America, stated in 2021 that anxiety disorders are the most common mental illness in the U.S. now, affecting 40 million adults ages 18 and older, or 18.1% of the population every year. Young people have the fastest growing firearm suicide rates of any age group over the last decade, resulting in the rate of firearm
Ms. Barnett,
suicide.
that's your 3 minutes. But we do have time for questions if anybody's got a question for Ms. Barnett. And seeing none, thank you for being here today, and thank you for those statistics. We're back in session, and Chairman Todd, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I appreciate the committee's serious look at this. As far as the reciprocity goes, I think we're starting to see a trend across the country where more and more states are taking moves just like ours to recognize that 18 to 20-year-olds' rights have been infringed upon for many years in our laws. And they're seeing, as we are, the need to reverse that infringement. And that's all this law does. Of statistics that have been mentioned when we went out of session, and in other venues, those statistics generally deal with criminals, folks that don't obey our laws anyway. So we're not passing this so that criminals will suddenly be straight and obey our laws. They're violating the laws today. So any statistics you want to bring from 18 to 20-year-olds that are already violating the law are irrelevant in this conversation. So I would just implore you to think back again to your oath of office, what the words of the Constitution says very, very clearly, and we shall need to take these infringements off of their rights. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Chairman. And Chairman Curcio, you're first on the list.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, sponsor, for the bill. We spoke about this offline, but I just wanted to clarify for the record. Is it your understanding that 18-year-olds can lawfully possess now in Tennessee?
Chairman Todd.
Yes, sir, that is correct.
Chairman Curcio.
So 18 to 21-year-olds already can possess, they just can't carry with a permit. Is that correct?
Chairman Todd.
That is correct, sir.
Chairman Curcio.
Thank you, sir. And, you know, I know the training for the permit is not, you know, it's not ongoing. You don't have to, you know, continue to receive training year after year after year. And we've talked about this in this committee. But would you agree that some training is better than no training? I.e., if an 18-year-old then gets the permit, they've by definition got more training than they did right now, where they can legally possess but have no training.
Chairman Todd.
I would say potentially that's true. I mean, I grew up being trained with firearms, and I think a lot of children do. I've trained my kids. I think that's a responsible thing for adults to do. And I think just like this is separate and different because we don't have a right to operate a vehicle. That's not enumerated in our rights in the Constitution. But if I go and get training at a driver testing station, or if I just go and pass a test, I still feel responsibility to hone my skills and to make sure that I can drive that missile down the road, and I drive a pretty big missile, that will be done in a safe manner and not harm others. And so I think we all have that personal responsibility, and it's no different than our responsibility if we express our right to free speech. We get on the radio and start talking negatively or saying lies about someone. You know, that doesn't remove that responsibility that we already have to treat others fairly and to protect others. So every right comes with responsibilities without a question. And I think putting some requirement on this right, that you have a certain amount of training or go through some course or something, it just isn't in the Constitution. I think it's a responsibility that each person has, but it's not something that we as government, I think, have the ability under the Constitution to require of someone.
Chairman Curcio.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I agree with those sentiments. And I'm reminded when I saw this legislation first come across, I was reminded of some interesting video footage that I've seen of John Kerry, who later went on to become a United States Senator and then was a candidate for president, and his buddy Jerry Springer, who arguably went on to be more famous than Senator Kerry did, when they lobbied the Congress to be able to vote at 18 because they'd both served in Vietnam on swift boats and other venues and had been shot at and jumped out of airplanes and done all the things that we ask our 18-year-olds to do, yet they couldn't vote in the elections for the politicians that were deciding whether or not they lived or died or sent them to Vietnam, and they fought hard for that and won that. And so that's why I've always voted against the 21 tobacco legislation. I think if you can jump out of an airplane, you'll be able to burn a Marlboro, but I lost that debate. So I just, you know, even if I was sort of tempted to have concern about this when I first looked at it, you know, at every turn I went, okay, 18-year-olds are already legally possessing in Tennessee. They're already voting. They're already joining the military. They're doing all of these things. They're either adults or they're not. And again, I think John Kerry and Jerry Springer solidified that one. So maybe we could name this one after Senator Kerry. He might appreciate that. I don't know. So that's all I've got.
Chairman Todd, you got any follow-up?
I would prefer not the name. Thank you.
Representative Parkinson, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Mr. Sponsor. And my colleague brought up some interesting points. If you don't mind, Mr. Chair, can we go out of session? Because I would like to know, you know, the circumstances around when an 18-year-old can carry in the state right now.
Okay, we'll go out of session and hear from legal. Legal, you're recognized out of session.
Michelle Fogarty, Legal Services. An 18-year-old can possess, but they cannot, under current law, carry. Unless they are 18 and honorably discharged or retired from the United States Armed Forces, the reserves, or they are a member on active duty. So
Representative
there's a
Parkinson.
distinction between possession and carry.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Michelle. And can you tell us the difference between possessing and carrying?
Legal, you recognized.
I don't believe those are defined in this statute. 1307 initially says carrying with the intent to go armed. The exception says that a person is carrying whether openly or concealed. But I don't believe the terms possess and carry are not defined.
Representative Parkinson.
Well, that's vague.
Possession would be like ownership.
I'm sorry, possession would be what now?
Like ownership, like owning a handgun, whereas carrying would be like walking around with it.
And if I don't know if it's just me, but it seemed like if I owned a weapon, I probably carried it at some point. I mean, I had to get it home, or am I missing something?
Legal, you recognized.
Possession, armed or loaded or unloaded, the law makes it unlawful for someone under 21 to carry a handgun. But there's nothing in the law that makes it illegal for them to possess.
Representative Parkinson.
Okay, Mr. Chair, I'll defer to my colleague that got his hand up, and if you'll come back to me on the bill. Well, just check on me before we come out to go out.
All right, Chairman Curcio, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll check on Representative Parkinson as well. But legal, I guess my question is: so if I'm 18, I can have my gun in my home, I would assume, and under current state law, that means I can also have it in my boat, in my jet ski, in my canoe, in my car. So would that be an instance where an 18-year-old is out and about, so to speak, lawfully possessing a weapon but not carrying it?
Legal, you recognized.
There's exceptions like firing ranges, hunting. There's numerous exceptions throughout the code, but I believe so, yes.
Okay.
Chairman Curcio, you're recognized.
So potentially then, and in all likelihood we do, have 18-year-olds in Tennessee who are lawfully moving about the community with a gun.
Legal, you're recognized.
Again, there's no statute that prohibits an 18-year-old from possessing a handgun.
Thank you.
Chairman Curcio, you got anything else?
No, sir, that's it.
And Representative Parkinson, we're just checking on you.
And thank you for that, and thank you for the clarity. In regards to possession versus carrying, even though in a car they're carrying.
And is that for legal?
That was for the universe.
Okay.
So, Mr. Chair, if you don't mind, we can, if nobody else has anything, can we go back out of session?
Oh, well, we got some more.
Okay.
Representative Ogles, okay, and Representative Ramsey, you got something for legal? Or Chairman Ramsey? Okay, we're back in session, and next up is Representative Ogles for the sponsor.
Thank you, Chairman, and to the sponsor. This piece of legislation brings up several issues that I think we really are going to have to deal with at some point. The age of adulthood. You turn 18, there are certain things you can do, certain things you can't do. I really don't like the 18-21 alignment on many things. If it were my will, we'd wait till 21 and you couldn't vote, you couldn't drink, you couldn't drive a car. I don't know that you could. I've got daughters. I don't know that you should date before 21.
25.
Yeah, there you go. But when I read, and I had to check because I'm not a constitutional scholar like some of you are, but the Second Amendment, when I read it, it says a well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. I know we latch on to that second part, shall not be infringed, but that first part always gives me a little pause and trouble on how to deal with, because the third word of the Second Amendment says a well-regulated. The third word is regulated. So when I read that, our founders who wrote the Constitution, I think they agreed that there should be some regulations at some point or, and I'm seeing head shake, so that word wasn't supposed to be in there. They miswrote it. So, well, I mean, it's in there. It's in there, and it's always been in there. So I think we have to, when we look at regulations, that's what they are. They knew what that word meant. It's always meant the same thing as written. Unless that was the King James Version and we and we're reading the NIV. I don't know. But I respect you greatly. And I think this is a hard issue to deal with. 1821, we talked on the phone. As an 18-year-old, if you commit a crime, you're tried in criminal court as an adult. But yet we've created that 18 to 21 no man's land where you might not be able to carry a gun like every other adult and defend yourself or defend those people you care about. So this one's hard for me. It really is. And I think, I appreciate you bringing it because I think we need to have a good talk about this and figure out the best way to work through this. I don't know if it might not be create a special permit. I know we all hate permits, but a special permit maybe from that 18 to 21 and throw in some training. But anyway, I'll quit ranting, but I would love to hear your thoughts on that word regulated and what you thought the meaning was to that. And thank you.
And Chairman Todd, you can be recognized, but we just got about 4 minutes.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. If you look at the sentence that you just read, regulated refers to militia, not the keeping and bearing of arms. It is a well-regulated militia for a reason, and those members of that militia have the right to keep and bear arms, and at 18, you are part of the militia in the United States of America.
Okay, next up is Chairman Farmer. Question's been called. We're voting on House Bill 1730. We have any objections? We just seeing one hand, two hands. Okay, so we're voting on the objection. So okay, we're voting on previous question. So all those in favor of previous question signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, no. Ayes have it. We're now voting on House Bill 1735 as amended. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, no.
No.
Ayes have it. Civil justice full. Okay, so that leaves us with 3 items, and we'll address number 8 first. It's been taken off notice without objection. Number 8 is off notice. And that leaves us with items 6 and 7. Item 6, 1898, we rode to the next calendar, and item 7, 2063, House Bill 2067, next calendar. And without objection, we will be out of session. And thank you, committee, for all your hard work today. Adjourned.